pretty cool. In the studio, Robert Dozier, Robert's Executive Director, Mississippi Independent Pharmacies Association. Robert, good morning, sir.
Good morning, Paul. How are you doing today?
And on the phone, it's Mr. Kim Rodgers, that we introduced as Mrs. Kim Rodgers, but we know the truth now, pharmacist from Petal, Mississippi. Kim, good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. How are y'all today?
I'm doing good. Can you hear us? Everything okay?
Yes, everything's good.
We have a little delay there, Robert, so we'll just deal with it. First of all, medical marijuana, your thoughts, and just as opening up, your thoughts on this as far as the pharmacists are concerned in this state.
Well, the Mississippi Independent Pharmacies Association have taken a stance to oppose Initiative 65. The Independent Pharmacies Association Board of Directors met with both sides, and after the second meeting, from listening to both sides of the issue, they decided to oppose Initiative 65. This is not a true medical marijuana program for the benefit of health care. If you start looking at all of the people out there who are opposing 65, pretty much everybody in the healthcare industry is opposing 65. So therefore, this is not a true medical marijuana program.
Kim, would you say, and I said this yesterday and got some feedback on this, some of it negative, some of it positive, that when you start looking at it, because you even had people in California said, my God, what you people are doing in Mississippi is more liberal and progressive than what we did in California. In California, we have 80% of the municipalities have opted out. You people in Mississippi won't even let them opt out, which is a leap. That in consideration with, as Henry Barber said yesterday, over $6 million from people out of state, people in state pouring into this to make sure we have this law and that these drug dealers become legal in our state through the Constitution. And if that happens, we probably have the closest thing to recreational marijuana of any state that has medical marijuana. Would you agree, Kim?
From what I read last night and studied up on this subject matter, you're absolutely correct. This 65 initiative basically cuts out the community, cuts out any oversight by the medical community in terms of trying to make sure that these patients are adequately tended to. If you're going to use marijuana in a medical form, it needs to be regulated by the medical industry inside the state.
Robert?
He is exactly correct. I go back to, doctors, hospitals, now independent pharmacists are all opposed to this right here. If you want a true medical marijuana program here in the state of Mississippi, first thing you need to do is not put it in the state constitution, but you also have to have input from your medical providers out there. Paul, if we allow this to happen, we're going to start seeing what they call these medical marijuana dispensaries or these treatment centers, but really all they are pot shops, start popping up all around the state. And you start talking about the zoning issues. I know the realtors are very concerned about the zoning issues. Yep. It is a very touchy subject right there. These municipalities are going to be really hurt. I'm a father of a 7-year-old. I don't want a dispensary of this nature right across the street from his school.
Cannabis is on the march. 33 states and District of Columbia have legalized medical marijuana. 11 states, District of Columbia, legalized recreational use of cannabis for adults over 21. I think ours is at any age, is it not?
I do believe so.
It's a high school student. It's young people. It's college students. It doesn't really matter as long as you find a doctor to write you that certificate.
And one thing that Henry Barber said yesterday while he was on your show was they will be targeting that age group, the gummies, the all this novelty candy and everything else like that.
And for you people who need to know this, that if you see some things that are just shocking to you, and to the point where there are some products that look like kids, mimicking kids things like the Pop-Tart or Pot-Tart, and you call your local legislator or anybody else, they can't do anything about it because you have put it in the Constitution. Let me play this 30-second spot here. This is from the former mayor of Denver, Colorado.
I was Denver's mayor for 12 years. That was before we legalized recreational marijuana. The city has changed a lot since then. some of it for the worse. There are more pot dispensaries than Starbucks and McDonald's combined. Pot-related traffic deaths are up 32%. I heard the same promises about money for education. That money is going to marijuana regulation and the pot industry, not students or schools. Do your research. Once you vote, you can't take it back. I wish we could.
That says a lot right there.
I think that's the first time I've heard that ad, and
Yeah.
I think the gentleman is spot on.
And it's the same way in the state constitution. All that money goes to support the industry. Not a single solitary dime can be used, regardless of how many times the session meets in regular session or special session. Doesn't matter.
That
It's
is correct.
in the Constitution.
And don't forget about, what is it, the $2.5 million that the state will have to loan the industry to start this program up?
Which I don't understand how they do that.
I mean, I'd like a $2.5 million loan.
Kim, it is amazing to me, though, because I've got 3 or 4 sheets here just doing some research on medical marijuana. I saw a study by Harvard that showed, according to Harvard, and it is Harvard, and I hate to say it, some of it I don't even trust because they seem a little lenient on here, but I will give you this, that there are some things like glaucoma, schizophrenia, some things like that may or may not, where if everything else has been tried, in coordination with your doctor, with your pharmacist, going through the protective checks and balances that it doesn't interact with any of your other medicines, marijuana probably is a good idea. I have said it on the air myself. If I'm terminal, in hospice or something, if I've got pain, this relieves it, give it to me. I'm on the way out anyway. But that said, this can be done through 65A, can it not, Kim?
Yes, it can be done through 65A from what I read about 65A, because the legislature can then have some ability to legislate after people. The biggest problem with using medical marijuana is still marijuana. You can stick the medical in front of it. It's still marijuana. And the problem is the THC, psychoactive part of it. You can get the same cannabinoids from the CBD products that you can get from marijuana. Mm-hmm. It's also interesting that in a lot of states that have medical marijuana, they do also ban it in a smoking. You have to take it in form of a tincture or a cream or something along that lines.
Is that right? Well, in ours, we haven't decided as far as the legislature is concerned. And when they say the legislature does this and we do this, that's hypocritical and a sleight of hand, because the legislature hasn't decided how to establish it.
That is correct. Not at this point has the legislature just decided. But if we go and we pass 65, the legislature's hands are tied.
Unlike any other prescription drug used for medical purposes, marijuana is not subject to central regulatory oversight. It is grown in dispensaries which, depending on the state, have regulatory standards ranging from strict to almost non-existent. We haven't established. I guess the health department has to do that, and I'm not sure if they can do it.
That's correct, and you're right, Paul. And don't forget, if 65 passes, mm-hmm. the health department is only going to have about 8 to 9 months to get this program up and going, from what the language says. And in the day and age what we're looking at with COVID out there, mm-hmm. I think Dr. Thomas Dobbs is rather busy right now, focusing on other issues.
Anyone have any idea of the drug that your kids or your grandkids will be taking when in the next few years? Are the growers, do they care about it if they're in-state or out-state as far as the growing standards or even where these things are going to come from? We have no idea. Do you know that if a marijuana plant and its products happen to be contaminated with fungus or mold, what it would do to an immunocompromised patient? Not good news.
No. Who
are you going to sue? I mean, you can't. Where are you going to go? Who are you going to? You can't sue the doctor. It's like going to Kim and saying, "Can you imagine a doctor? Certainly, if it's on telemedicine, saying, here's a card. Go by the drugstore, get anything behind the counter you want, up to a limit." And I think there would be some consequences to that. How many pot shops you want in your city?
That's correct.
Kim is with us also. Kim is a pharmacist, Kim Rodgers in Petal, Mississippi. Kim, how do you think first of all, you guys are really out of the ballpark here. You don't have anything to say about this, do you, as far as a pharmacist?
According to this initiative, we would be totally left out. There's I think 33 states now that have medical marijuana. 9 of those states actually require the pharmacist to be involved in the process of the dispensing of the medical marijuana. In some states, the pharmacist determines the concentration of THC and the balance with the other cannabinoids in the products given to the patient, which I think is fantastic because, quite frankly, the last thing I need to do is be given a psychoactive drug to a patient who's also smoking medical marijuana, and I have no earthly idea knowing if that patient is on medical marijuana.
Here's what worries me, and this is just one of those logistic things, is that when you pour $6 million, when you have Joel Baumgart putting in, as a state representative, putting in over $1 million, you have people like this Ham Cambia guy in Washington, D.C., who is an advocate of ecstasy, who has began another initiative in Washington, D.C. to legalize prostitution that he was thrown out of his own creation because of sexual abuse allegations. When you have these people feeding this kind of money in the state of Mississippi, they want something, and they want a return. They don't really care about Aunt Mamie's arthritic toe. They want a return on their money. And from all I've learned, in a place where you have medical marijuana and where states have done this as restrictive as possible, there's no way financially they can make that money back at the level amount of money they're putting into it. In other words, if you do medical marijuana to address pain, as most of those people who initially signed on for it, then it's not going to be the moneymaker that has to be to get that money back. Am I right or wrong?
No, you're very correct on that.
So they know that the spigots are open, and the way they have written this bill is frightening.
Well, it is exactly correct, and they're looking for a huge return on their investment. And this is going to be a prime example of corporate greed at its finest, because just what Kim said, the pharmacists are left out of this process right here. Mm-hmm. The only part of the process, if 65 passes, is these dispensaries will have to have a pharmacist as a consultant. And all that's going to be is probably the owner of this dispensary paying a pharmacist a monthly fee to be a consultant. They might come in there once a month. That's it.
I do wonder about this. The concentration of THC, the principal psychoactive ingredients in this, is now more than 20-fold more powerful than in marijuana products than just several years ago, several decades ago. For instance, the concentration, if a child or a teenager just driving, maybe they don't have a lot of experience in driving, and they get a hold of some of this. Older person with some hidden physical ailments, what could that do to them? Because there's no take just one pill that's on the label here. It's a cookie, is it not?
Well, Paul, you had a gentleman on your show a couple of weeks ago, a gentleman from Vicksburg, mm-hmm. the owner of a barge company over there.
Right.
And he was talking about how his workers and the dangerous work that they do on these tugboats and everything going up and down the Mississippi River. You don't want someone on medical marijuana working on the Mississippi River or driving an 18-wheeler, or what about a healthcare worker in a hospital, a medical office, or even a pharmacy taking medical marijuana and everything. So there are all these questions out here, and 65 is being pushed as a medical marijuana program, and it's being played on a lot of people's emotions out there.
I mentioned something about the recreational marijuana. This is as close to recreational marijuana in this website, which is, I'm not sure if it's some young geek or who happens to be, it's nameless, Mississippians for Medical Marijuana. I'm sure they're being paid. Said, no, it's no, they opt out of recreational use. Well, they did opt out of recreational use in California. But at the end, that was not my point. But when I looked at this, I said, here's a guy that's giving information to people in the state using the word He thinks it's funny because we went on earlier talking about the people that could possibly be adversely affected on this one. And he said nobody's ever died from an overdose of marijuana. I don't know that to be for sure, but I do know this. When you hear people like this guy say that it's caused innocent people who are not smoking marijuana to die.
I was Denver's mayor for 12 years. That was before we legalized recreational marijuana. The city has changed a lot since then, some of it for the worse. There are more pot dispensaries than Starbucks and McDonald's combined. Pot-related traffic deaths are up 32%. I heard the same promises about money for education. That money is going to marijuana regulation in the pot industry, not students or schools. Do your research. Once you vote, you can't take it back. I wish we could.
When you are at the funeral home burying your child because of a driver who came at you across the line, I don't think the word ha-ha is a very good idea.
No, I don't think so either, Paul. And if we want to establish a true medical marijuana program in this state, we have to have the healthcare providers sitting at the table. If you look at 65 right now, you're seeing all of the healthcare providers against 65. You also need law enforcement sitting at the table. Where's law enforcement right now? Law enforcement is against 65. So all of the individuals, the true trusted healthcare professionals and true trusted law enforcement officials, they're all against 65 right now. And the other thing too, Paul, is we just do not need this in the state constitution. I've talked to some legal experts that I'm friends with, just got their personal opinion, and they all tell me the same thing. We do not need this.
Well, it's bad news.
Exactly.
It's bad news. With anything, we've experienced that with casinos. We experience it with anything else. There's some course corrections. My God, we experience that, Robert, on a yearly basis with bills that we pass. We got to come back and kind of tweak them. We've done that last year, the 20 and this year, to be honest about it. So you can't do this. It's passed. The drug dealers wrote the law. Tell us that we're going to loan them money, and that we will. The state legislature, every sheriff's department, every mayor, every elected official will have to adhere to what it is in the Constitution, and they're right.
That's true. And you look at the Department of Health. They are opposed to this, and they're the ones who are going to have to
All right,
implement
how do we
program.
do this? Kim, do you have any ideas? By the way, I want to ask you this, both of you guys. When you go into these pot shops, as he said, more than Starbucks in ruined Denver, you have to pay cash, don't you? You can't put it on the card. I don't think you can charge it.
To my knowledge, Paul, you're exactly correct. You have to pay cash.
Do we know what it costs? Let's say 10 joints is what you can get a day. Do we have any idea what that costs? Does anybody out there have any idea? I don't. If you do, give us on Twitter or. But again, I mean, it might be varied. It might be for different names and things such as that. The edibles probably are different prices than the smokes. I'm not sure. If anybody has any idea what 10 joints would cost, because I don't know, and I'm asking honestly, I have no idea.
Nor do I. I couldn't tell you, but you start looking at the money situation, and you're exactly correct, Paul. To my knowledge, the banking industry is not in favor of this as well either because of all the banking regulations.
How do we, Kim, final thoughts from you, sir, how do we convince people that, if you think it's a good idea, and I do, that we vote 65A just as a stopgap in case 65 passes on the yeses at 50.1%?
I'm not sure how you influence people. I'm just telling them that I really think that 65 is flawed, that 65A is the way to go. I think that medical marijuana is going to eventually happen at some point in the state of Mississippi, and we've got to be prepared. We've got to do it right. We don't get a second chance. Well, we do get a second chance, but you'd have to to get a second chance. So that's why I'm encouraging my people that ask me to go for 65A.
The other part of that is this, and people need to know this, that if you vote no, then if you are the winner on that one, if you're the winner by 50.1, I guess, if you win and vote no, and if a slight majority wins on no, then you don't have to worry about 65 or 65A. But if you lose, and according to the polls, you're going to lose because it's over 70% of the people who are going to vote yes on that. So if you lose, you have a second chance to at least do it the right way by voting 65A. I don't know how else to put it any plainer than that.
You dumbed it down, Paul.
Thank you guys for coming in. Appreciate you spending some time with us. Kim Rodgers, and also the Executive Director, Mississippi Independent Pharmacies Association, Robert Dozier. We have Dr. Mary Taylor. She's going to join us coming up at 8:05. We'll talk about